for clarification of understanding and things like that, we've got to make sure that within the cycle we've got that feedback. It improves communication, and it helps that decoding. It's the old question that I used to have we had a school teacher who was a maths teacher. I'll never forget him because he used to communicate with volume and aggression around the classroom, and constantly would ask us. And I remember this topic of sitting and listening to algebra for what seemed like hours, weeks, months, and he used to come up to you and ask you and say to you, do you understand it, McShane? Do you understand the algebra now, the X and the Y and the A plus B, and, in front of peers, in front of all your classmates and everybody else, the answer typically was, yeah, I understand it. Of course we understand it, until we get the 20 questions homework, we get the outside the classroom, and you look at it and think, blimey, that's it. And they end up the 2 out of 20, and the feedback's bad, and the cycle of poor performance continues, and we've never had that feedback situation where the receiver can give some clarification and summary, and that's because it's a one-way communication. We've got to allow for feedback to make sure that actually happens. Typical questions around that. Anybody? What type of questions we can ask to clarify feedback in communication? Checking for understanding. Anybody got to throw a few out?
Yeah, I'll have a go. Open questions, Stuart.
Yeah, open ones that you can probe with and get some information and some understanding. It's one of my customers. For years they've had interns into the business, and they're a vintage clothing wholesaler, and an extremely intelligent person working in a quite a dynamic business, but made an extensive mistake on some trimmed Levi's into some very trimmed short Levi shorts, because the message and the interpretation of the measurement and where the taper would start and finish got it the wrong way around, and started destroying in effect the jeans, because we've not checked for understanding and demonstration, or make sure that people do understand what's critical in that piece of communication, and what we can actually say back to get the action that we want. So, key on the receiver and the sender. So, thinking about what's going to be sent, the emotion that goes with it, and that receiver, all the sound, the sight. It's not just speech, and of course the feelings as well. And there's all sorts happening at the minute with people that are back at work with communication in the workplace and communication media. I was talking to a company this week just to say, what are you doing? How are you speaking to people? How are you keeping them going? And compared to the bit that I showed you at the beginning around briefings and things like that, yes, there's WhatsApp groups now. There's briefings taking place. Morale calls, personal calls to maintain people's morale and motivation at the minute. Explaining them why the roles change, why it's important. Just getting that motivation and feedback to people around their performance and how they're doing and how they're coping with what's happening in the business. So I just wanted to show you another example of a very simple briefing method that's being used, and it's an example I'm using of a company. Just very, very basic briefing sheets that are being used to communicate with people. So when we, this is Port West, a client, and it's just so that there's going to be regular communications, key themes and constant themes that can fit into a daily briefing, just to keep that contact going and tell people what's happening. You know, in this case, the word West just spells out the words from above. You know, essential operational issues, things they need, anything that's been affected by systems and procedures. You know, and what about tomorrow? What do we need to do? What's happened? Is there anything different? So briefing sheets, very basic, and it's 10 minutes. That's a 10-minute briefing. 10 minutes at 10 to 10. I didn't come up with that, by the way. But anyway, it's just a simple way to be able to get information back into the teams wherever possible.
Stewart, before we move on from there, can I just come back in with another example of kind of getting that feedback and why you need to do it? A personal example. I mean, somebody my size, I typically get my shirts made to measure. And when I started dealing with this company, it's all done mail order. They send you the template out that you put your measurements in, and you got to put on whether it's inches or centimeters. And so I measured neck and your chest and stomach and length and everything and arms, and I sent it back, and put that it were inches. But they did actually ring me, because I'm quite a big chap, as most of you know. They did actually ring me to find out whether I'd made a mistake and should it be centimeters, which I took as a compliment. But it's kind of they actually took that on board and said, well, we better just check here that this guy has put the right kind of dimensions on. Is he talking in centimeters or inches? So just an example.
Yeah, it is. It's where communication goes wrong, and if we don't have the two-way and the clarification, then you can end up with something that's a bit too tight, Mike. The other bit that I've spoke to people about is the email culture that we have, and how that's been used through the lockdown. It seems to have increased. It seems to have. We should expect it to, I suppose, but the importance, the flagging of how important things are. Everything seems to be important that I'm copied into and checked into, and I just wonder whether it's the best way. The email elements at the moment, it's the easiest thing in the world, isn't it, to send email information, and it's with all communication, there's a degree of responsibility that comes with it, and that sometimes with emails, I think it gets lost. Another customer that we have that when they've got to get information from people. It's difficult now because not everybody's responding, not everybody's there, but because they sent the email and asked for additional information for a drawing to be done, so something could be made, that's their responsibility gone. It's not because it stays the same. We've got to follow that responsibility through, and so I don't know what people's view are on the email culture, but I always find that I remember being a young manager, and it's a long time ago now, but when the memo was king, and I had a boss who used to send me memos from his office that were next to mine, that had a glass partition, because that was the thing then that came out, glass partitions, and his admin assistant would bring in the memo, and I came to the decision, unless I really understood what were going on, what was the request for. A memo never made a man do anything, and I'd much rather see the person face to face. We can't see face to face as such now without social distancing. But I'm just concerned that we're just using that media of email far too much as an easy way to do it. I just wondered what your views were on that and how you select your choice of communication. Anybody in the team this afternoon?
I'll put my hand up. Sorry. Yeah, it is interesting because a lot of our customers communicate through Facebook with us, and again they expect instant responses. Sometimes, late on a Sunday evening, Saturday night, we get question marks because we haven't responded straight away. And interestingly, this week we've had a customer emailing us, and we felt through the email she was trying to push us to go back to install the blinds before we're up and running and ready to do that. So when we actually rang her to speak to her, it wasn't that. She wanted to help us out. She said, I thought you might be struggling for money, and you want some money coming into your business. But actually on the email it came across that it was quite demanding and really pushy. So
yeah, and that's the decoding, isn't it? And the way that we interpret it, and it's not always the case. But yeah, and the email, the other email element again, around the COVID part. I've got another customer who's there's a site, it's a construction site that is ready to go. It needs steel putting in, secondary steel into the building, and that company just cannot complete that at the minute. And so the pressure that they're getting is everybody's waiting for your change of or your input into this project, and it's really frustrating for companies. And if that's all done on email as well, the sensitivity around it and understanding of why that's happening is not always understood. The conversation, the telephone call is extremely old hat, I know, but it helps you just to get that emphasis and understanding and the empathy around what is going on.
Yeah. Kevin, do you want to come in as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to make a very quick point that there are now so many ways of keeping in touch. I mean, we've just started using Teams over the last 6 weeks since COVID started. But it's really interesting. I mean, I'm sat in my garden, I've got the kids running around, I've got the dogs. But email is all about accountability and traceability, isn't it? I mean, people thinking, well, I sent you an email, therefore it's gone off my desk. I've got a bit of an audit trail. If the shit hits the fan, then that's all right because I've covered my arse in that respect. But there are so many different ways now of keeping in touch. I just wonder how we're going to see things happening when we do come out of COVID. Are we going to revert to what we did previously? Are we going to carry on? I just don't know. I mean, I hate emails, I have to say. I mean, Fran's probably listening in to me, but I'd much rather have a conversation with a person. Phil and I do it regularly. We'll pop in and see each other and chat, but an email, you lose the flavour and the context and the whole point of contact with that person. I think
more so now with, as you said, with a lot of the sensitivities around it, and I did a sales workshop last week, and that I actually started by saying, should we actually, is it too insensitive to to be calling people? Create a good debate, around what is expected and coming through the other side. I hope we learn a lot of how to be more effective with some of the old-fashioned communication rather than fall back into the email culture.
Just one other point as well. I mean, my wife's working from home as well at the moment. She's a bank manager, so she's actually currently running a call centre for HSBC and Marks and Spencer Bank from our hallway.
Wow!
So every morning there's an hour's conference on Zoom, and listening to how they're interacting and changing and the way that they behave with each other. You can still tell that it's a very corporate sort of style, but it's become more and more relaxed over the last 6 weeks. From day one, there's been a gradual decline in, well, an increase in banter and good humour and general chit chat. She just had a conference this morning talking about how they're going to be more resilient and what they've learned from this 6 to 7 week period of communicating online. So it has changed things drastically, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, and the level of communication, the type of communication. I mean, Richard at Port West won't mind me saying at all, but the level of targeted information he manages remote sales teams around the world, and so every country has a different level of intensity in terms of work activity, and therefore, how they communicate. And he's absolutely, it's been every two days he's communicating with his teams, just working on the morale, asking people if they're tired of being asked for face masks yet and things like that. It's impressive, and he's got them locked in to being one team in this scenario, despite the fact that they're spread all over the place. And I think that's what the opportunity presents us with our communication approach is to try and bring people in, to one team. And I don't mean that just, if you've got lots of people in your business, I don't mean that. I mean customers, I mean colleagues, peers, everybody into the team wherever we can to get the momentum and find a way to get through to the other side, because that's the key.
The other thing, Stuart, using that particular example, knowing Richard and knowing his boss Harry, who owns Port West, the communication there is, I would imagine, daily as well. The Harry talking to Richard.
You won't believe it. And this is again, he won't mind me saying this, and I'll shut up talking about Port West then. But the fact that they've probably never worked as hard as they are doing now, in terms of hours and effort, they've never worked as hard, and it's just that level of dedication and determination that's coming through that I see, and it just, I just think, blimey, think about that, and what can I do? Well, what can I do to, sharing stories like that with colleagues, we've got to up the ante wherever we can, and embrace communication in a way that will get everybody through, and morale up. And when really it's we've all got our challenges. Anything else on that? Just on emails, just to put, there's a 4D methodology that delete is the first one. Half the emails can be probably deleted immediately. A lot of them, these, your inbox is full, and the rest of it, let's delegate some stuff that we can, and get somebody else that can do it just as well, if not better. Do it if it's urgent and can be completed. And the last D is defer. Set aside a lot of time to do it where you can, where you need a bit more time to do it. So, there's a bigger time element that's locked into that email culture. So why is communication difficult? And just what is it that makes it difficult? Why do we struggle with it? If people say, "Oh, if we could only improve it," what makes communication difficult? Question to you.
Anybody want to come in on that? Anybody want to put their hand up and answer?
Yeah, I'll come in. I suppose fear of making yourself, sorry, you've got the dogs around. Fear of failure and people thinking you're looking a bit silly, I think, ultimately. Your own management style, the way that you do communicate, can be held to account from many different sources, especially, as I said earlier, with that many different ways of communicating. Not getting it right and looking foolish, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's lots of barriers. I mean, the biggest barrier I honestly think we have is the barrier around not being able to listen properly. We spend a lot of time learning how to talk, and people tell us different things of how we speak and the rest of it, but very little time spent with listening. And the barriers to communication and communication blockages are we're distracted by all sorts of different things, dogs, sunshine, all sorts of different elements. But the big one is people really find it hard to listen, and more so now, empathetic communication is really critical, and I'll go on to explain that a little bit. I just wanted to show you a video clip, and if you tell anybody I showed you this, I'll just deny it probably anyway. So, it's a classic for communication blockage because it's in a foreign language, and some years ago I went out with the British Coal projects that were the first ones that looked at business development and enterprise out in Russia and out in Poland, and I always remember people talking about working safely, and the biggest working safely problem that people had at the time was that people were drinking extensively on site, particularly in the pits, in the mines, and lots of vodka apparently. But so this little clip is just it's the pit mine. It's the mine manager been interviewed about this allegation of drinking, and this is a real communication blockage for me. But visually, it tells us all we need to know. So it's the question that they asked him was, there's reports that they've been drinking. There has been drinking on site, and he's defending his pit and his men to say no drinking going on here. And this is the video.
Зарплату последнюю дали это 6 марта за ноябрьскую месяц.
Отработали вы когда?
Последний месяц, в ноябре, 17 ноября.
Because it's frozen, because it's on digital.
Потому что не платят. Постоянно обманывают.
Думаете, поможет?
Не знаю. Надеемся на вас.
Sorry guys, it's frozen because it's online, I think. In fact, my whole PC is frozen now. Wonderful.
While Stuart's sorting his PC out, what I will do.
It's frozen, Mike. Sorry about that.
You got it, or
no? Go on.
Right. Yeah. While Stuart's sorting that out, I'll just do one or two little admin tasks. I think Dom sent an email out not long since, just about the we're catching up on things because we've got a new system at the Skills Bank, just for the kind of collecting the company data, whereas we'd normally have come round with a form because of the COVID situation. What they're doing, just asking if we can record things online. So I think there's a link that Dom sent out to everybody, just saying, can you register? To register for each one, it's just register for the series of webinars on the Skills Bank, and then that captures the information that they need. So Dom's Dom sent that link out. If you need any help in doing it, or you've got any queries on it, please give us a shout. So that'll get the admin done. There shouldn't be a great deal to do after that. The second thing is just in terms of the programme going forward, that tomorrow I'm going to be doing the strategic sort of follow on to what we did last week. So putting together your one-page business plan, getting it all on that strategic compass, and we're going to be spending more time what we went over last week, looking at what your vision is, and then looking at the various tools that we've got for analysing the business situation, generating some strategic alternatives, and then coming up with your chosen alternative, and how we then go about using the techniques that Stewart is hopefully telling us about today in terms of communication, to then get our employees on board and get everybody pulling the same direction to implement the plan that we've come up with. So I'm doing that tomorrow. We've then got on Tuesday, and Stuart's trying to get back in. There we go. I'll let him back in. Hopefully his computer's unfrozen. Next Tuesday, we're going to be resetting the organisation. So been doing some work with a company, I'm sure John may mention them, but they've started back up work, and as they've started back up, they've identified that they've actually got 50% of the production with just 30% of the employees. And so now what they're wanting to do is utilise that as a kind of productivity model for going forward. So we're going to get more details and the sort of tools and techniques you can use for doing that, which John Mellor will be going through with us next Tuesday. And next Thursday will be the cash flow module that we spoke about last week with Andy. Andy was saying how they did a cash flow model every week with CPS. He thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, and we said we'd go through the same techniques with everybody, so that you can all put your own cash flow forecasts in place, and hopefully then you see the benefit of doing it. So anyway, I think Stuart's back up to speed with where he was, and I've just busted off and got my admin stuff in the way. So ready to hand back over, Stewart?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my Russian miner froze on me. It's the first technical problem we've had, and it has to be on the communication module. Okay, I'll send you that at some point when we've finished anyway, so you can have a look at it. And we talked about barriers to communication, and I was saying about listening. Stephen Covey's 5th habit of highly effective people talks about first to be understood, first to understand and then be understood, and that's his statement. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply, and you get that feeling, don't you? Lots of times with conversations where you feel the next person is just wanting to say something in response to what you've said without really listening to what's been said to you. And I think we've got to, as managers, as leaders, make sure that we really make an effort to get that listening right, and have that empathetic listening to get the facts that we need to get out of what's said. A gossip is someone who talks to you about others. A bore is somebody who talks to you about themselves, and a great listener is someone who lets you to talk about yourself. Again, I think it's just really important that we focus on listening. And there are different types of listening I just mentioned that one. That's, you know, the competing one where we're competing for things, to say things before understanding it, the opportunity to reflect, and the other style is around being passive and attentive. So focus on understanding the content of what's been said, understanding what it means to the speaker as well, and what the feelings are that are attached to that. I think people forget the emotional bit, the emotional intelligence around communication. You mentioned earlier about the questioning technique, the open questions, probing questions, and things like that. The way that we can really be effective with our listening is making sure that we do use open questions, and we ask the key ones, the famous 6 ones: the how, the who, what, where, when, and why. The key open questions. Probing, leading. Sometimes we need to use closed questions, but the techniques to get that information out from you. You know, that some of the questions in a sales format, that, you know, there's the open questions that you can use there. There's some that I always use. You know, asking about expectations. You know, what are your expectations exactly? A really strong open question that get people to give you information so you can actually understand what's going on, really decoding that message. It's the same with praise, giving feedback to people. It's pretty important that we give praise. I was talking to the manager up at, I don't know, Kevin, you know, anybody up at Cannonall these days, but that they're having a challenge in the sense that they're busy, 3 times as busy as they normally are, and actually getting feedback and praise into people has been critical, because they're working 10, 12 hours and not being able to always give the feedback they want, and you know, they're using WhatsApp groups and things like that to get back to people, and it's important that we do it. I just want to talk to you a little bit now about non-verbal communication as well, because again, the Zoom element and the video conferencing, all this sort of, you know, all this sort of stuff brings in non-verbal communication to the point where, you know, I mean, I can't even see everybody, so I don't know what's happening with everybody, whether people are you know, attentive or not. But it's important that we remember about. Come back to that in a minute. That we remember non-verbal communication, that, you know, it's massive, the amount of emphasis on body language as opposed to just the words that we say is quite big. I saw somebody just typing out on chat there, Mike. Is there somebody who wanted to ask a question?
Making balloon animals off camera. I think it's your chair that's squeaking. So no, it's not somebody making balloon animals.
All right. So non-verbal communication, it's important that we're aware of it, we look for it, see what people are communicating, you know, without the spoken word is important, because it's a lot of emphasis, and more so when we're communicating, what we're doing when we speak to people and our teams. So lots of different things, different suggestions. I'm not a non-verbal communication, reading body language expert, but there's lots of different ones that we can pick up and look at. And it's just my emphasis is to say, right, okay, let's make sure we're aware of it, particularly when We've got the barriers of the video links and all that sort of stuff. So this communication cycle that we've talked about, there are a few things that I think we can remember that will help us when we decide on what media we're going to use, whether it is written communication, verbal communication. And there are a couple of things to remember. And again, the example I gave earlier and the examples we're giving about measurements and things like that, you know, let's just make sure the ABC of communication, make sure that we're accurate. We're accurate with what we put, the information, what we put, so things aren't misleading or end up being misinformation. Absolutely accurate. And advice, and somebody said earlier about writing process and everything else at the minute. We've absolutely got to be accurate what we're saying and what's possible and what's not possible. So be accurate with your communication. The B stands for brevity. The briefer the better. Keep it short and simple. Brevity. Make sure if it is a lot of information that you have to present back to people, then break it down into bite-sized chunks so people can digest it and understand it. Back to that briefing sheet that I showed earlier on. It's a simple tool, but it focuses the information into categories, and it allows you to be brief. And the next one is clarity. You know, double check, go through it. Does it make sense? Is the clarity in the message that you're giving and that you're presenting to people? So accuracy, brevity, and clarity. Just linking to that cycle as well. The other ABC to remember is that before you send anything or before you decide on the communication, make sure there's a clear aim to it. Pointless communication just for the sake of it. There's got to be an aim to it. What aim do you want to happen? What do you want to achieve by that particular piece of communication? The second one on there, the second B on there is around bias. How much emphasis do we need to put on it? What level of importance do we need to weight this communication with? What bias? I don't mean thumb bias and finger bias and crown green bowling. I mean, what emphasis do we need to put on the communication? Because, and again, it goes back to people that flag emails, flagging email. Everyone's important. How do we actually know the ones that are really important if everyone's flagged and sent to us for high importance? So make sure the right bias is in there. The last C on there is about setting the climate, the right environment, the right setting to be able to deliver the communication. And that's tricky at the moment because sometimes we're having to give bad news as well as optimistic news of coming through the other side. So we've got to create the right sort of climate, particularly when we're giving feedback. And we've got to remember that we're giving good and constructive feedback throughout. So just make sure you create the right climate when you decide on your communication and what's happening in a minute. Any examples of planned communication that people are becoming or creating that's a habit now? What are people doing? Any examples?
I mean, good examples are things like bringing people back from furlough and how they're doing it and things like that. So is that one, Stewart?
Yeah. That's got to be accurate. It's got to be understood, and again the fact that in terms of climate and bias as well. one thing I found with people that they're having to decide, they're deciding who they're going to bring back from furlough and who they're not bringing back from furlough at this particular time, and that's got to be carefully managed. The communication that's used, the style of communication that's used as well, because it's, you know, the question is, well, why am I not coming back? Why am I not been asked to come back at this stage? And it's you know, despite, you know, that becomes that becomes sensitive as well. Any other examples?
Communicating with customers about, you know, starting back up again and re-picking up projects.
Yeah, I mean, we've got that. You know, I've got a few examples of that as well as we go through. But yeah, you know, it's just a simple methodology of getting the message right, and yeah, customers are pretty key on this, and you know, that we do make sure that we have that planned communication with people rather than just sitting tight and hoping you know, things will be fine. We've got to talk to them. It's funny, we've got Bush Engineering Mike spoke to me this morning, you know, and it's really nice that they say, you know, there's a possibility that we can get things back on track with projects, and you know, when they say, you know, sending you virtual hugs and kisses, you know, for the MD to be sending those to me, you know, knowing Peter, but it's nice, you know, people are thoughtful about what they say and what they do, and that were quite nice to get in a communication from a business owner, you know, that's.
I mean, it sounds a bit like, you know, the setup, but it's not a setup. But just an email that we've got today from a client, which were really good to receive, and yeah, an extract is going on our website. So it's you know, from the MD. It would be good to have a quick catch up. Once we're out of lockdown, I want to start the next project. And then he goes on to say, you know, the stats about, you know, their business and what they've been doing through the lockdown. And they're in a fortunate position that they're actually producing health-related products. So they've been key workers, they've been producing stuff for NHS. But yeah, he goes on to give me some stats that literally they've been running at 4 times the production that we originally started working with them. All right, that were like 2 or 3 years ago, but first 6 months they've got out double what they were doing when we first started with them. And his last sentence was, in a nutshell, we could not have got to where we are now without the work we've already done, which has given our key staff the skills they needed to manage our operations during these demanding times. I would like to pass on my personal thanks and look forward to working with you again. You know, like as soon as lockdown's over, you know, they want us back in there. And that to me is great. I mean, A, it's something that we can use as marketing collateral, but B, is telling us that, you know, is one thing, and it's actually Keith who's been doing that project, the latest phase of that project, back on site as soon as it's safe. So, you know, like with you, with the company in Leeds, Stewart, you know, they're now looking at going back. We want everything to be safe, but we need to communicate the timescales and ground rules and things like that for going forward. So yeah, you know, communication with your customers and suppliers is key, as well as with employees.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm just going to add to that in terms of the emotion element of communication. There's a couple of couple of theories that talk about ego states, and I just want to mention them because when we get into difficult conversations, and we may, and I've experienced one or two in the last couple of weeks about the things you mentioned about furlough, about who works, who doesn't, the changes in way people work and things like that. That has created some conflict in some businesses, and thinking about how we deal with that, and the ego states that we've got typically, the adult ego state, the here and now, the getting the right sort of action and decision made is the norm. But when there's emotion involved and people are under pressure, and we fall into different ego states, and we've just got to recognise that people, one of the ego states actually is something called the rebellious child, where somebody reacts really from pressure and emotion about what's going on, and not being able to do things, or feedback that's not good, and that reacts and gets people at times in a conflict discussion, and it's important that we as managers, as leaders, have the patience and the opportunity, take the opportunity to, one, be the empathetic listener and communicator, but two, ask some questions, get right to the point of the emotion, because we need to be able to get people to think rationally rather than irrationally when emotions are involved. So just remember that people's emotions can be all over the place. We've got to have the right adult approach to that. We can't react. I mean, they say behaviour, prompts behaviour. We've got to be the one that sits back and that's calm and gets to the crux of what the facts are, and help the people understand why we're doing things and get them through the other side. So just be mindful of that element of the emotional intelligence and communication.
Yeah, Amanda, you wanted to ask a question. You want to?
Was just make a point really as well about consistency of that communication. So I've been writing the COVID guidelines for our customers. So we've got to be really clear as a team that we're all consistent with the messages. So our installers are confident that the customer's absolutely clear on what they need to do. So I think consistency is really important as well. So a consistent message.
Yeah, right across to everybody, and the result then is consistent, isn't it? The customer satisfaction that you want, the safety and the satisfaction are the key elements and key outcomes of that. Okay. So just a bit about that I mentioned, the approach and engineer. Approach and challenging communication then. We've got an opportunity, I suppose, to, massive influence by getting the communication right. And, I'm thinking of high-impacting communication. And going back to Stephen Covey's element of the empathy, we've got to create and focus on impact to get the right sort of message, but we've got to be mindful of the people's, the individuals' feelings, and how certain words can affect them. Sometimes even if you don't agree with them, you've got to respond, and you've got to think about how they will be. And as I said, we may get negativity in some of these conversations. Don't leave that unchallenged. Deal with it adult ego state to get both people out the other side with the right decision overall. So it's really important that we.
Well, it's interesting. We had that one as well in the return to work safely. So from an HR point of view, that if you got negativity, from your employees, what were the things that you needed to do with your employees who were being negative, didn't want to come back to work, didn't want to do this, didn't want to do that, were saying it's not safe, and all the kind of negative comments. How do you deal with that, from a communication point of view, Stewart?
Well, as I said, the emotional element of it, understanding with being consistent at the same time, because we've got policy, we've got procedures that we've got to follow. We've got to try and take the emotion out of that and just give good reason, and stick to what we're saying for the right outcome. And there is, and I've seen it, there isn't negativity, and we've just got to try and work with people to see through the other side, and convince them that there will be opportunity. It might be different opportunity, we might be doing things differently, but all is not lost. So it's raising that morale again by key messages.
And one of the things that we did, one of the early COVID projects that we did with the client who was in a key industry, providing services to glassworks. He got employees who didn't want to work. They were looking at it in one way. They were quite happy to sit there furloughed on 80% rather than coming to work for the extra 20. And he got contracts that he needed to fulfill at various glassworks in the area. And what we needed to do was take away all their objections, but do it, kind of dispassionately. We put in place a safe system of work. We put the barriers in place. We put the working procedures in place. With Sarah from health and safety aspect, me from the engineering aspect. And she checked it out with the health and safety executive, so that we knew that they were happy with what had been put in place. So at the end of the day, the guys didn't have any sort of legs to stand on for not coming back into work. I think the original dispute as such kind of came up on the Wednesday when they were refusing to work. But by Friday, we got everything in place for them, and the MD were highly happy that, and he were actually saying that, oh yeah, they're happy now. So it's listening to what people say, taking on board the communication that they give back to you, and then literally you're acting on it, doing something about it, and being seen to do something about it as well, and showing that you are a kind of caring employer doing your duty of care to your employees. So yeah, it's got that receiver side of things and listening to what's being said.
Yeah, the other thing that I've seen, Mike, I've seen it on a different approach and on a bigger scale, where MDs of businesses have said, right, there's, I'll be contacting you with a briefing each week, updating, just as I mentioned on the briefing template there. But he also gave his personal number to everybody. It's quite a bold thing to do in terms of lines of communication, direct line communication into the MD on a company that employs, 150 people, something like that. And on the furlough element, he actually had a phone call back from somebody who said, I used to do this in the business. You probably don't know me and know that I didn't do it. I do this now, but is there an opportunity for me to come back and do a bit of each of those roles? Because I don't want to be at home on 80%. I'd rather be in the business doing something. And that I don't think that would have happened if that company hadn't had that approach to say, right, there's some direct lines of communication I'm opening up to, and I don't care when you ring me. If you need to ring me to get an answer, I will respond.
And that's like being open to that communication. And it goes back to management by walking about. Like, when I had a proper job and I were running engineering companies, I always used to, as much as I could, kind of spend at least half an hour a day on the shop floor, walking around talking to people and letting them talk to me and tell me what the issues were. And if you can't do that, then there's something wrong with either the way you're doing things or your communication, because you've got to be able to defend. It's almost like question time or Dominic Cummings on Monday, sitting there and being open to kind of challenge about what you do and what you've done and being able to defend it, whether you can defend it or not if you're Dominic Cummings or whatever. But you can walk around, talk to people on shop floor, let them know the reasons behind what's happening, as well as the formal communication, the informal, so that people, if they feel they can talk to you, they're more likely then to follow you into battle when you need them to do something, if they know that you're a real human being like them.
Yeah, and there is another side to that, though, Mike. There's another side to it with, and when I mentioned earlier about explaining roles and what people do and what people need to do differently, particularly with senior managers or business owners, people that are working through this, their comments are, well, we don't see any of the senior managers around. They're not putting themselves at risk, or they're not, and I've had comments like that. But the observation that's not made is that those people aren't usually in that setting anyway. They're doing other things. They're not in that as a normal situation, and so that's why it's important that we communicate what we're doing, what's our contribution, what are we doing at this current time, and if it means that we're working in certain areas of the business that is essential, then people need to understand that and not forget that perhaps that wasn't the case before. It's not just that the people are keeping out of the way now because of personal risk.
That comes down to your personal style, though, doesn't it? I mean, the businesses that I've managed, starting at the beginning with kind of 15, 30, 80, 120 employees who were, direct kind of chain in command under myself. I've always been able to go around and communicate to each one of them, and it's part of the senior management role to be visible and be able to do that, and make sure that people can see you on a regular basis. Do that management by walking around. I think that's crucial in whatever you do with
Yep. Okay, next slide. These slides, there's lots on them, but there's lots on them for a reason, that you can just take them away with you at the end and have them as reference points. So in terms of visual communication, they're far too wordy, but they're there for a reason. So I won't read the slides out, but I'll just paraphrase through them. So remember, I mentioned to you about non-verbal communication. Listen to what's not been said. And it is personal. I don't think people listen. They believe that they want to speak instead. So practice that empathetic listening closely, and don't always focus on the words. Make sure the body language is there. Look for opinions. We want opinions. We want to challenge a little bit. nothing worse than nothing being able to be challenged through people giving opinions. We've got to make sure about the consistency we mentioned, about the accuracy and the rest of it, but try and help people to see what the future is. Get to the point quickly, and it's just an example I've thrown in with a visual that through the other side. This is about controlled assent, getting back to where the company needs to get to, what's important, what's the focus for people, so they understand, helping them to see where we're going, that things aren't going to be the same. It is going to be a bit of a controlled assent back to where they formerly were, and we've got to make sure that everybody knows what points of attention they are, what the future is, what the vision is, what we've been really good at, and what do we do coming out? What's the plan? What's the action plan? A lot of the managers that I've spoken to, we're all sort of looking at 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plans. You're getting people to write stuff down is not always as easy as it sounds, but just some action points of attention, way forward. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. What are we actually going to do when we get back? When we come back into the workplace? And Amanda, you said this is all so very near now, isn't it? And you've been spending time doing this. Having that action and that consistency will pay you back throughout the next 30, 60, 90 days. Just a thing about the questioning again, and getting to talk to people and understand things. And this is a slide I used the other week, but this working from home, it's not quite right, is it? It's like we're working at home during a kind of work, so it's a little bit different, and we've got to understand that. And in terms of you as individuals, we've got to take care of ourselves. We've got to make sure that all the physical and mental elements are there. And this working from home and long hours, we've got to be kind to ourselves as well, and make sure we don't fall into the trap of been exhausted because we haven't really looked at what we do and why we're doing it. So a couple of these things on it, I've got a constant battle in my head with what everybody seems to judging people on what they're doing, how they're coping with it, rather than looking at how that you're doing it yourselves and dealing with this situation. I know one thing for certain, that success is not going to be measured in the same way moving out. So we've got to communicate that to people and make sure that we get expectations, get them in line with reality. Decision making that we've had to make. Do we go back? Do we not go back? Get people involved. Get into the conversations where they are adult conversations. Staying calm, making decisions, talking to people, not just anybody at work, people in your life, that help you to make those decisions. It really is the time to talk and get that next stage of things out to business. Just a couple of slides on I'm having an absolute disaster today with this. That my whole computer's freezing if it's left on for any period of time. I'll just keep talking to you. I'm not going to shut it off again, but just talking about change coming through, change in the way we handle change. I think, you know, the responsiveness, it's the ones that are most responsive to the period of change that we've got now that will come out of the other side. The ones that wait and hope and do little other than let everything else, not everything else, but let key things like the communication with customers and everything else, let somebody else have that responsibility. We've got to manage it properly when we're coming through this period of change. So we've got to make sure that, I mean, the best way to explain it without the slide, you know, there are lots of driving forces, I think, that are there around change, and you know, we've got to be positive and look at the positives, what those driving things are, and make sure that we share those with our teams, and at the same time get rid of the things that are holding it back, holding that change and working differently. And again, that's, you know, mapping things out. How do things work? How can we improve them? How can we adjust them when we come out the other side? Just want to talk to you now about customers, about relationships with customers, and what a lot depends, I suppose, in many ways, what our relationships were like in the past with customers. You're as good as the relationship you built with your customers prior to this. So it's important that we use this opportunity now to look at ideas, creating ideas, possibly new ways of working, even new products, and get people to, you know, to embrace them. And it's almost a period of time where we can introduce ourselves again, introduce products and service again to our customers. So I just think I have a rule that, you know, depending what sort of customer they are, in terms of key customers, you know, developed customers or nursery customers, really new customers, you know, try and get some planned communication with them that is interesting, that is helpful, and that is relevant. They're the things to get into your communication, and it comes back, and people do want to talk, and anything that we can do, you know, let's be the planners, let's be helpful, and the information providers. Let's really show people and understand that, you know, there is room for optimism. We can be positive about coming out the other side, and you know, it will bring new opportunities. For some businesses, it's brought opportunities that have literally doubled turnover because of the situation. I was speaking to an MD this morning, and you know, his words were, we've been really lucky. He was almost apologetic that the business was doing extremely well because of the situation they found themselves in. But you know, they've looked at the opportunity that was there, and managed it properly and safely, and it's given their business a boost and a lift. So it's not all negative around the conversations that you have with customers and speaking to them, but it's getting them to understand that you know, let's get these plans in place. Let's look at the ways, strategies to come out the other side, and you know, we can be in a much stronger position if we do just investigate this and come up with some plans. What's the communication been like with customers in terms of planned communication? You know, sending things that are of interest, useful and relevant. That's my sort of rule of thumb when I do talk to customers. Any findings or experience that people have had as they've gone through the last 2 months with customer communication.
Kevin, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Stuart, this guy that you spoke to this morning, have you advised him to maximise that opportunity and make hay while the sun shines and talk about it to other people? I mean, there seems to be a reluctance with people I've dealt with who are doing well to tell everybody how well they're doing because of the situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, he almost seemed apologetic about it, and but the first thing that I said to him is, they've done what they have done to be able to operate. They've done extremely well, and you followed guidelines completely. And being apologetic for his success, I think, is just in his own mind that every other business might be struggling. That they're not, and it's not luck. He's been able to adapt to the change and maximise the opportunity that presented him, just like lots of different scenarios that we're faced with. But this one is so deep in terms of not being able to operate in the main. He feels a bit embarrassed about it, but to be honest, I've encouraged him to say, we are successful. We have had a lift because of the COVID-19, but we've done it properly and professionally. And commercially, it'd be naive not to do that. But he's quite humble in the fact that he knows it's not as straightforward for others.
Anybody else want to come in on any examples there? I mean, thanks for that, Kevin. But we have had a number of our clients who there's been polarised. We've had a number who've been doing really, really well because they're in the industry that deals with the COVID-related issues. And there are others who've been affected by the COVID-related issues, who've been severely affected by it. Some of the ones who've been doing well, I mean, they both had an effect on us, because the ones who've been doing well have been saying, we ain't got time to do that project, we want to put it off until things calm down. And then the others who were affected by it saying, well, we're all off work, so we don't want to do that project until we're all back. So from our point of view, that's why we've been looking at new ways of delivering things. That's why we've looked at the opportunity of getting involved in webinars and delivery like this. And I think other people can do the same. That's one of the things we're going to be talking about in strategy and strategic alternatives. And I think the saying is, if life gives you lemons, then make lemonade. So look at how it's affecting your business, and then look at what you can do to make the best of the bad situation or good situation, whatever it is. Just look to maximise what you can do for your business out of it. Look for opportunities and things that you can do rather than things that you can't do, and again, communicate those. So Kevin, is your hand still up, or was that a new one?
No, it's still up. I think that just to come back on the many different ways again. I mean, there's quite a few tenants on here, and we've been not reluctant to engage with everybody, but we've phoned everybody. I think just about on site. We've had verbal communication. We've had non-verbal communication with everybody. Phil shaking his head there. But it's just a case of what is enough or what is too much. There's been so much support around from Enterprising Barnsley, from central government, from local government. It's a case of filtering out what you would like to read and what you would like to hear about, and just being in the right place at the right time, I think. I don't know if... were you shaking your head at me there, Phil, or not? You were.
Non-verbal communication.
Yeah. It's just finding the right way of doing things, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. I mean, non-verbal communication. Everybody's frozen on my screen now, so I'm just gonna bat on. I've got a few more points to make, but apologies for that. The whole system's frozen completely. Yeah, looking at communication, two bits of 2 slides. Sorry, that I want to talk through around communication. Now, and I mean the summary points, you know, we've got to, wherever we can, make sure there's positive message to our customers. You know, that relationship, that planned communication, building the relationship, ongoing and build the relationship, something positive, useful, relevant to people. Make sure that the empathetic approach is used, you know, particularly around the listening element and that. And even our customers, you know, in our case with Brook, a lot of them a lot of the projects are suspended rather than cancelled, and you know, it just shows you with the relationships, irrespective to whether things are going really well or not so well for those companies, you know, the fact that we're talking to them, you know, they really do want to get engaged again, because they've seen the benefits, even though, you know, some of them, as Mike said, you know, have not had the best of times at all. You know, yes, we've got to pick up new customers where we can, but you know, we've got to be, you know, we've got to survive through this period, and so anything we possibly can do and differently to keep things moving, then we will. I mean, we've had a customer go back to oil refinery this week in France, you know, that was just an instant lockdown, 43-day lockdown initially, and out people came, you know, so the income was instantly turned off, the revenues were turned off instantly, and you know, people have got through it, and they're back this week, so there's positive coming out, and we've got to just keep engaging with people around that and helping them wherever we can to trade and trade with us as we get through it. At the end of this presentation, there's I've just put a tip list, and it's not just about communication with COVID. It's more general about how we behave as managers, and how we look at communication. So it's just a few things I'm just going to finish off with. First thing on that list, it's ironic. Be visible. Be visible wherever we can. Mike's mentioned it about the management of walking around, but we can be visible with all the technology that we've got, and make sure that's happening. The example I gave about the MD and the direct phone call, getting that person back working and off furlough, you know, be accessible. Make sure you're accessible.
And not just employees, but also your customers and your suppliers as well. Yeah, your suppliers are going to want to know that you're going to be about to be able to pay them, A, for what you might have already on credit, and B, if they do any new work for you, are they actually going to get paid? You need to be there to be able to reassure them. And also, you know, your customers, talking to your customers and making sure they're aware that you are there as soon as they're ready to sort of leap into action again. You are there to jump in with them. So keeping those channels of communication open. You can't do too much communication at this point in time. Just keep communicating.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Remember about your communication that you do decide on. Remember about the accuracy, the brevity and clarity, but also just make sure it is interesting and of interest when we communicate. You know, get it to the point where it is relevant, it's consistent, all the things we've discussed. So make it interesting. Just remember about the one-way communication, avoiding one-way communication. Telling is not sharing. We've got to be really careful on that. Sharing information is not the same as just telling people. You know, let's avoid the one-way communication and the you know, that can lead to the misunderstanding and the decoding in the wrong way. Example that Amanda gave with her Facebook customer. So be prepared. Make sure that the communication you do fit into the ABCs we talked about, and make sure that goes into your message. This next one is it's a sports one really, and it actually this comment came from a rugby player, the captain of England when they won the World Cup, and Johnson, it was his name, and he talked about the big talk and the little talk. The big talk is really important. The strategy, what we're out to achieve, but you know, he really emphasised the little talk, what happens in between, the reminding of people, the feedback, the helping to motivate people, getting people to understand what's expected of them, how they contribute to the overall success of the big talk. And I think that's a really important one, that you know, we get alongside people and get those little talks in. Honesty and integrity every time. I put that because, you know, the messages that we give, you know, I wrote something down listening to one of the health ministers. I think she was from, I don't know where she was from. I think she was from New Zealand. I can't quite remember. But she just said something around, you know, messages should have real integrity, and I think she might have been referring to the guy that you referred to, Mike Cummins, about the message. So this is the message, but I'm going to do something different. So we've got to really have integrity, I think, about that honesty and integrity every single time, particularly through this period. The next one to remember is creating the environment. I said climate on the second ABC. Creating a situation. We need to create a situation, an environment where we can get rid of mutterings, where people will, you know, share their mutterings openly rather than take it away and mutter. And that's really about being open and getting some honesty and some engagement with people moving forward. And the engineering company that I'm going to go back into fairly soon. You know, it's all about, you know, getting people's views honest and openly out on the table, so we can deal with them, and people are comfortable in that environment to contribute. So an important one. And the last tip on communication, I would say, is that, you know, we've got to make sure that messages are tailored. They're tailored to the audience that's going to be receiving them. You think about the people that you're talking to and what message you want to get across, and make sure you tailor the message accordingly to the group. We started the session today talking about what communication was, and that, you know, it was pretty easy and simple to sort out. But we also said that people forget to you know, put the easy and simple things into place, and I think with the focus on the ABC analysis, the focus on different levels of communication with customers and employees and suppliers, if we get some structure to that and continue to keep the communication flowing in two way, then we've got a far better chance of coming out through the other side, and that's the message I think we've all got to keep echoing. So, as far as the presentation is concerned, that's the end of the presentation. But we've got time to take any questions, and anything anybody wants to say or share with us. We've got time. We've got 15 minutes or so. I think it is 15 minutes to do that.
Anybody got any particular questions on communication in their organisation, either suppliers, customers, employees, or even to trade groups that are associated with it? Anybody that they want to ask any questions or give any experience of what they have been doing or not been doing, or anything that they're going to take away from today's session and actually do as a result of today? How about yourself, Neil?
We've just kind of carried on as normal in a way with our communication, because we do use a lot of tools, like we're using Asana and stuff before and stuff to try and keep track rather than using email. So, but we've just transferred over to Basecamp, so we're going to start using that, which is a bit more integrated for everything and not using Slack and a million other platforms as well. So trying to integrate all our communication into one place.
What's that called? The Basecamp?
Yeah. Yeah. We've moved over to that. So it's a really good platform for just keeping everything in one place, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've still all the way through this been picking phone up to clients and stuff. So we're just touching base with everybody, which is all you can do. So I think, but going back to like if you're doing really well in a situation like this, or you're keeping ticking over, and then there's people like on the other side, should you say that or should you not, kind of thing, because it's some people are a bit doom and gloom about everything at the minute, and I think everybody should, if they're doing well or things are fitting into place like now, people should shout about it, I think.
Yeah.
Back on that.
I mean, not in a bragging type of way, but in a kind of empathetic.
Yeah.
And if there's anything we can do to help, and bring anybody else on board and do whatever, with suppliers or anything like that, that you might be able to do to help their cause, So that's the sort of attitude that I would have said. Kevin, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, just following up on what Neil just said, I mean, I've just jotted down Slack, Basecamp, Zoom, Teams, Asana, Capsule, Outlook, MailChimp. I mean, I'm using all of these bits of software. I mean, it's probably a question for Phil or an opportunity for Phil, just to bring all this together into one bloody thing, that instead of having to flip between all these different software and applications that just confuse me as a 60-year-old. I mean, God knows how you're going on, Mike, at 64.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Thanks for that. Yeah.
But just keeping things simple, I suppose. And just, is there one, I'm just curious how you're finding Basecamp, Neil.
I like it. I've used it with other clients for years anyway. So I like it as a platform. Asana, I've tried to get to grips with it for last year or so, and
difficult, isn't it, that one?
It's just not sitting. I don't know. There's just something not sitting right for us to be using it as fluid as we need to. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. I think Phil's disappeared, I noticed, but
I'll ask him. He sent me a message when he was going. Thanks. Real gems in there. But
I think my other point to Stewart is, I mean, I'm an avid Trump watcher, as people probably know from my Twitter feeds. But
I've never seen you comment so much.
Just looking at everybody's communication styles. I mean, we had Dominic Cummings on Sunday or Monday or whenever it was, and we got Trump spouting, we've got Boris Johnson. you know, wouldn't it be nice if we really understood what they were all trying to say? But I think just the beauty is everybody's got their own communication style, and it's just filtering out what you want to hear and you take from it what you can.
Yeah, it has been interesting watching all that, but yeah, that Basecamp element that that platform you mentioned, you know, in terms of technical information that you can send out to people, you know, technical and compliance stuff and things like that, all linked in, is of interest. I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, I think you used to be able to get on different level platforms, like for different amounts of usage, but they've flattened that out, so it's one charge now a month. Yeah, you used to be able to get cheaper than it is, but it's not now. They've flattened it all off to one level.
Right.
I might have a look at that for us though. It's not something that, you know, being 64, as you said, Kevin, you know, that I've had opportunity to look at, but I think I will do going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for us because, like, when we're sending proofs to clients and things, we can have kind of everybody who's involved in one project, and literally leave all the feedback and everything in one feed. So there's no, well, I sent you this email and I've not got it, you know, kind of thing. Literally everything's there. That's your paper trail, essentially.
Yeah,
that's why it's of interest, because if it, particularly around compliance and technical information that needs, you know, needs a lot, you know, from you know, architect to QS to designer to project manager, you know.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, we've literally just moved over to it. We're just starting to move clients over to it and stuff, and it will be better for us in the long run. I mean, the last design company I worked at, we were using it, and there's one of my clients that we're involved in their Basecamp, what they use, so for their projects. So it does work really well. Like, you know, just as a collaboration tool as well, and it's got its own little like chat feature if you want to just chat with somebody, as opposed to like using Slack as well and stuff. So it's it's pretty good.
Oh, thanks. We'll probably have a look at that.
It probably does a lot more than what I use it for as well. But it is useful.
Yeah. I mean, we're running towards the end now, but has anybody got any other questions? I know Kevin's just gone off video as his lunch has arrived. Phil, like I say, need to shoot off. We've got one or two others on, just kind of no video on, but I'm assuming that Fran and Jamie and people have not got any questions, unless you want to stick your hand up and ask any. Fran's here, but no questions. Really informative. So yeah, if there aren't any other questions, Amanda, you're on. You got anything you want to ask, or shall we wrap it up there?
Yeah, I've just finished my dinner, so thank you very much. I've enjoyed it, Mike.
Yeah, no, thanks for that.
Thanks, Stuart.
I missed saying at the beginning that we'll send the slide, the recording, and I missed the beginning. I forgot to put it on record. It'll be on the BBIC channel shortly, so I'll send that through to Kevin for BBIC. And again, just reminders for tomorrow, because what we'll be doing is going through that process to arrive at your strategic plan, so that you can then look at things that we do this week, which is getting more for less, and techniques to do that with John on Tuesday, and then the cash flow forecast on Thursday, and then we move on to the others like the leadership and HR and sales in the subsequent weeks after that. So all being well, I'll see everybody at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And I want to send a couple of emails out, just a bit of information beforehand for people, so that you can have a couple of things about your own organisation, a couple of questions just to get answered, and then we can start putting them into your strategy for recovery going forward. If there isn't anything else, what I'll do is thank everybody for the participation.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Stewart, for delivering the workshop.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Thanks, Mike.
Talk to you.
Cheers, guys. Speak to you tomorrow.
See you later.
See ya.
Bye.